This is Bot City, and I'm Jet West. Today on the show, Apple spent half a decade hardening the M5 chip security, but a scrappy outfit called Mythos cracked it in less than a week. Anthropic found a 27-year-old bug in OpenBSD last month. OpenBSD is not an obscure, dusty code base that nobody looks at. It has been audited and fuzzed by some of the best security researchers in the world continuously for more than 2 decades. World-class eyes on world-class code for 27 years. Mythos found an exploitable vulnerability anyway, and more than 99% of what the model has found so far has not been patched. That number is the story, not the capability, not the launch event, not the press release language about surpassing all but the most skilled humans. The 99%. Sit with that for a second. The model is called Claude Mythos Preview. Anthropic unveiled it a few weeks ago through something called Project Glasswing, an industry coalition that includes AWS, Apple, Google, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Cisco, CrowdStrike, Cloudflare, and a handful of others. Anthropic is offering up to $100 million in credits to Glasswing partners to run Mythos against their systems. The model itself is unreleased to the public and, according to Anthropic, will stay that way. The reason they give is that the hacking is too good. That is not marketing language. That is a statement with receipts attached. Here's the one that I keep coming back to. Apple spent 5 years and probably billions of dollars building memory integrity enforcement for M5 silicon. MIE is a hardware-level security feature introduced with the iPhone 17 and A19 chips designed to stop the category of attack where malicious code reaches memory it has no business touching. 5 years, billions of dollars, hardware level. A security firm called Caliph used Mythos to break it in 5 days. The exploit is specific. Kernel memory corruption on bare metal M5 hardware with memory integrity enforcement enabled. Caliph linked 2 bugs and a handful of techniques to corrupt the max memory and reach parts of the device that should be structurally inaccessible. Working code, demonstrated. Not a theoretical risk score, not a CVE flagged in a spreadsheet, a working exploit. Apple is currently building the fix. The Caliph team wrote, "This work is a glimpse of what is coming for hardware and software that was built in a world before Mythos Preview." That sentence is doing a lot of work, and I want you to hear it clearly, because it is not a marketing line. It is a conditional statement about time. A world before Mythos Preview means the current software inventory of every organization running on legacy C and C++ code bases, which is most of the critical infrastructure on the planet. The implication is that the inventory was built under one set of assumptions, and those assumptions no longer hold. What Mythos is doing technically is worth slowing down for, because this is where coverage has been slipping past the hard part. The model is not running a faster version of a traditional vulnerability scanner. It is doing what Cloudflare describes as exploit chain construction. And that phrase means something specific. A traditional scanner finds individual bugs and scores them. Low severity bugs sit in a backlog. The backlog grows. Nobody patches the low severity bugs because there are always higher priority fires. This is how it has always worked. What Mythos does is take those low severity bugs, the ones that would traditionally sit invisible in a backlog, according to Cloudflare's published analysis, and chain them together into a single, more severe exploit. Then it generates working proof that the chain is real, not theoretical, demonstrated. To do that, the model has to maintain semantic understanding across multiple vulnerabilities simultaneously, reason about how they interact in production conditions, and then write code that proves it. That is what senior researchers do. It is also what Mythos does, except Mythos does not take a quarter to do it. Cloudflare also found a 17-year-old remote code execution vulnerability in FreeBSD through this process, memory safety related, sitting in production code for 17 years. Cloudflare's conclusion, after running Mythos through internal testing, was that the reasoning looks like the work of a senior researcher. High praise. They also discovered something important about how not to deploy it. Running Mythos as a single agent scanning massive code bases does not work. The model loses context. It misses things. The organizations that are getting real coverage are the ones that split the workload into multiple narrow scope agents with a second agent filtering signal from noise. Cloudflare says using the model directly as a coding agent is the wrong tool for achieving high coverage. You need an architecture around it. Multiple focused workers, a filtering layer, intentional scope. That is not a plug-and-play deployment. That is meaningful engineering work, and it is not being discussed in most of the coverage. Meanwhile, Anthropic quietly reversed its own position on confidentiality. When Glasswing launched, partners signed agreements with confidentiality terms built in. Those terms are now gone. Anthropic told Reuters, and I am going to quote this carefully because the language is doing something interesting. While there was never a specific Glasswing NDA, confidentiality protections were something partners asked for at the outset and were built into agreements partners signed. Read that back slowly. There was never a specific NDA, but there were confidentiality protections built into agreements. Anthropic is saying both things simultaneously, and they cannot both be fully true. What actually happened is that there were terms. The terms created a bottleneck where one company sat at the center of every disclosure decision, and Anthropic changed the terms when the bottleneck became a problem. That is fine. The revision is the right call, but the framing of it is a different thing. OpenAI, for its part, launched Daybreak 2 weeks ago. Sam Altman announced it publicly, built around GPT 5.5 and a tiered access model that has already expanded to thousands of vetted users and organizations. Altman's language on the launch was that OpenAI wants to help companies continuously secure themselves, which is the kind of sentence that sounds like a feature and is actually a subscription model. Daybreak's partners include Cisco, Oracle, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto Networks, Cloudflare, Fortinet, Akamai, and Zscaler. OpenAI has also proactively approached the European Commission about access to GPT 5.5 Cyber for EU cybersecurity, and the Commission spokesperson said they welcome OpenAI's transparency. Anthropic's discussions with the EU are ongoing, but not at the same stage. The strategic divergence is real, and it is worth naming plainly. Anthropic is treating Mythos as a controlled dual-use system with genuine offensive capability and is restricting it accordingly. OpenAI is treating Daybreak as a platform and is scaling access with verification and tiered safeguards. One analyst described these as fundamentally different approaches to security and commercialization. That framing is diplomatic. What it actually describes is a different answer to the question of who decides who gets to defend themselves. OpenAI's answer is as many vetted defenders as possible, quickly. Anthropic's answer is a small set of US partners for now. What almost no coverage is touching is the remediation math. If 99% of what Mythos found is unpatched, the question that determines whether this is a net benefit or a net destabilizer is not the quality of the findings. It is the capacity to act on them. The CTO of Run Safe Security said last week that what Mythos surfaced in a single research effort would require thousands of labor years to fix and validate across every affected organization. Nobody has sourced that number precisely, but directionally, it is pointing at the correct problem. The patching backlog was already unmanageable before Mythos existed. Mythos is now feeding it continuously. The organizations that are going to survive this are not the ones that patch faster. They are the ones that have already started building runtime protections and binary hardening into their systems so that the gap between discovery and patch matters less. That is a harder architectural question than how quickly can we run Mythos. And it is the question most of the coverage is not asking. Nobody has asked the OpenBSD maintainers how they feel about an AI model scanning their code base and an AI company deciding when and how to disclose what it finds. That is a power dynamic being treated as background. It is not background. The honest read on where this lands. Mythos is real. The capability is not overstated, and the Caliph exploit on M5 silicon is the kind of concrete demonstration that makes the theoretical arguments unnecessary. What is being called a cybersecurity tool is actually a condition change. The assumption that defenders have time between discovery and exploitation is gone. It was always eroding. Mythos did not create the erosion, it just made the endpoint visible. Every organization running software built in a world before this model existed is now operating on borrowed time. And 99% of what the model has already found confirms that nobody is moving fast enough to change that math by patching alone. I'm Jet West in Bot City. Keep bussin'.
Grab news. Thomas.